So, Shadowkeep is almost here, and Bungie has just now revealed to us the vast majority of their upcoming weapon sandbox changes for Destiny 2. There really is a ton of information here, and I'm going to go through it all to make sure that my entire community understands all of the changes ahead of time, as well as maybe give my gut reaction to a few changes here and there. Oh, and I don't really have any new or exciting PvP footage to show you while this video plays. Yeah, sorry, I've been kind of busy lately, and the only footage I have right now is just random reckoning farming. So that's probably what you're watching right now as I talk. My bad. Anyway, here is the deal. There are a good amount of nerfs on the table, but also a ton of buffs. Now, the reason for that is, as you may or may not know, in Shadowkeep, Bungie is officially changing both the Lunafaction boots for the Warlock and the Titan Rally Barricade so that they no longer auto-reload your weapons. That is going to be a huge change, and it's going to indirectly make PvE a lot harder. Therefore, to prevent us from getting mollywopped by enemies on the moon, Bungie is tipping the scales back in our favor by giving us a ton of PvE weapon damage buffs. Here's what we have on the table for upcoming weapon changes. First of all, weapon mods are now going to be treated as reusable unlocks instead of consumables. Any mods you have in your inventory will be converted to unlocks. This gives players the opportunity to play with different mods more frequently. If the only copy of a mod you have is already in a gun, you'll need to reacquire one to unlock it. That is awesome. I really hate having to be so stingy with my current weapon mods. This new change literally gives us the freedom to toy around with weapon mods as much as we want without having to worry about them going bye-bye forever after using them. Awesome change. Auto rifles are getting a PvE damage increase between 25 and 30% depending on combatant rank. Bows are getting their PvE damage bumped up by 31% against minor enemies and 26% against major enemies, which is nice to see bows getting a little bit of love. I feel like they are kind of rarely used seriously in most PvE activities these days. Hand cannons are also getting their PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 30%, and both lightweight and adaptive hand cannons are now going to get a new firing animation when aiming down sights. Currently, players can shoot faster than the recoil animation of both 140 and 150 RPM hand cannons. So while the hand cannon looks to have fully reset from the recoil, the following projectile will be shot as if the weapon was still in a recoiled state. That explains a lot. So you're telling me that we've been out shooting the animation this whole time with 140s and 150s even though it looks like it had fully reset from the recoil? Mother of God. Well, hopefully that change just makes hand cannons more user-friendly overall, which I guess is always a good thing. Also, reduced the effect that the range stat has on damage range falloff. I'm trying to make sure that I'm reading that correctly. Are they saying that they're going to make range matter less on damage drop-off for hand cannons? If I am reading that correctly, I guess that does make sense. Literally every God roll video I've ever made on hand cannons have all talked at great length about the huge importance of range. I'll have to keep my eye on that change. That could really mix things up for what stats you might want on a God rolled hand cannon. Machine guns PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 25% and increased the effects of damage range falloff on this weapon archetype. Wow, I guess Bungie finally got enough angry letters from people who were swearing they'd play another game of Gambit over their dead mother's body after the insane amount of players on PC who used the hammerhead to literally cross-map people with their insane machine gun range. One can only hope. Pulse rifles PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 28%. Increased the effects of damage range fall off on this weapon archetype. Aw, that's sad. I like pulse rifles, but you know, I get it. Almost no reason to use a scout rifle these days because pulse rifles have almost the same amount of range. And now some archetype specific damage changes for pulse rifles. Rapid fire pulse rifles now deal 14 damage on body shots and 23.8 on headshots. And high impact pulse rifles will now deal 21 damage on body shots, 33.6 damage on headshots. Now that might not seem like it, but those are are big number changes. With that minor improvement for rapid-fire pulse rifles, an accurate player will be able to 3-tap basically any Guardian in PvP no matter what their resilience is. And that's kinda huge. High-impact pulse rifles will also be much more forgiving. With this new change, if you're using the Redrix's broadsword to kill someone, you can essentially aim for the neck. And if you just get one of your bullets to connect in the enemy's head, you can then proceed to body shoot them to death. Things might get a little wild in PvP for a bit with this pulse rifle change. Go ahead and keep an eye on that. Scout rifles. PvE damage is now increased between 18 and 36% depending on combatant rank. So let me get this straight. No scout rifle buff for PvP? I guess shortening the overall range for pulse rifles is effectively going to make scout rifles more viable in PvP. I thought they were getting more of a buff though. Well, at least 36% is pretty great for PvE. If you don't have your Polaris Lance right now, I highly recommend getting that done between now and October. Sidearms. PvE damage increased to minor and major combatants by 16%. Alrighty then. Sniper rifles. This one is pretty big. PvE damage increased by 47% against minor enemies. Although it's not like I'm out here trying to use sniper shots on Thrall, but good to know. More importantly though, plus 20% for the others. Not majors, mind you, others, meaning both majors and bosses. That is a big deal. Even though grenade launchers are the current reigning champs of dealing boss DPS, it looks like it might not be a bad idea to have a sniper on your person as well for future raids. Now they mentioned that exotic sniper rifle perk damage bonuses have been modified to compensate for that sniper buff, but still, there are some legendary snipers out there that are really going to be happy about that. Maybe I'll do a deeper dive on that in a future video. SMGs. PvE damage increased by 22.5% against minor and major enemies. Aggressive frame SMGs. Okay, get this. Apparently, there was a secret buff where aggressive frame SMGs were dealing bonus damage at close range. The bonus was 10% and also unintentionally always active. Jesus. I mean, I'm glad Bungie noticed and they're fixing the buff, but damn. I wonder what other ridiculous things are in the game right now that are maybe unintentionally active. Who knows, I guess, but kudos for Bungie to admitting to that mistake because full transparency is always the way to go. Anyway, the bonus damage is turning into the new base damage for aggressive frame SMGs. As a result of that, the Teraba and the Huckleberry, which are effectively aggressive frame weapons, are getting a 10% damage buff in both PvE and PvP. Not too shabby. May have to blow the dust off my Huckleberry in the near future. Alright, exotic specific changes. The Sweet Business is getting a huge magazine size buff from 100 to 150 and 15% more damage in PvE. High caliber rounds on the gun are being replaced with armor piercing rounds, and damage is changing in PvP from 13 on a body shot and 21.14 on a headshot to 15 on a body shot and 21.2 on a headshot. Look man, I think it's cool that Bungie is showing love to some forgotten exotics, but I have to be honest, this change is making me a little nervous. I'm pretty confident I'll never live in a world where Sweet Business is meta in PvP, but I don't know. I get a little worried when we move even a hair in that direction, especially when the buff primarily rewards people for landing body shots rather than headshots. Anyway, moving on, Graviton Lance is getting a 30% PvE buff, which is awesome, and Sunshot is getting a big magazine increase from 8 to 12. That's actually fantastic. A hand cannon with a small magazine is like having a personal chef who only knows how to make toast. Like, what's the point? Vigilance Wing is getting a 25% damage buff in PvE, and Crimson, God love that gun, is getting a frightening damage buff in PvP. It's going from 13.76 damage in the body and 24.75 in the head to 19 in the body and 30.5 damage in the head. Yeesh. With these new numbers, all you need is one full headshot burst in PvP and you can fire the next two bursts into the body and still get a kill. I'm telling you right now, boys and girls, be wary of this change. With that gun's ability to heal on a kill and also auto-reload, there's a really good chance that Crimson is going to be way more popular in PvP next season with this damage buff. Merciless fixed the missing aim assist stat for this weapon. Okay, didn't really even know that was a thing, if I'm being honest. Ace of Spades. Memento Mori's damage bonus is now affected by range fall off. Aww, wah wah. I just felt a great disturbance, as if thousands of voices of people who play on PC suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. Lumina, noble rounds should apply their buff to allies more reliably now. Not really sure what that means in terms of tracking, or was the buff sometimes not applying? Unsure. Either way, good news for people who use that gun. The colony's unique perk, Serve the Colony, now functions exactly the same way that auto-loading holster does. Cool. Finally, moving on to unique weapon perks. Subsistence reduced the impact of this perk on total reserves. Good. Subsistence is a weird perk, and I hardly find any use for it because of how hard it hits reserves overall. Good change. Ricochet Rounds. Oh, Jesus. This one hurts, boys, but you know what? I get it. Removed the hidden bonus to damage fall off. Totally makes sense. For so long, actually I'm pretty sure for all of D2, Ricochet Rounds has been the hands down winner of any weapon that can roll that perk. Even though it gives a little bit of range on paper, it had a hidden buff that made it better than even accurized rounds. That plus the fact that it gives you stability too, I mean, it's like no contest. Ricochet was the god roll winner every time. So of course now Bungie is chopping it down to size, and I understand. I still think Ricochet will be the go-to perk on weapons like pulse rifles, especially if you play with a controller because it gives range and stability. It'll also still be fairly good on hand cannons, but it's not going to be anywhere near as top tier amazing as it was. F's in the chat for Ricochet Rounds. Swashbuckler, perk now activates when getting a kill with ball lightning, and sort of the same thing for Grave Robber, perk now activates when getting a kill with ranged melee abilities, ball lightning, explosive knife, etc. As a primarily Warlock player, that is great news. I mean, for me anyway. It almost mends the hole in my heart from Ricochet. I'm probably going to be playing a lot more Chaos Reach in PvP this October, especially with the roaming super nerf. I can't wait to get out there and troll people with Swashbuckler and Grave Robber with my Warlock. Moving on, 1-2 punch. Please raise your hand if you didn't see this coming. There should be absolutely no hands in the air right now. I'm sure we've all seen the videos by now. People literally beating the shit out of Riven like it's a backroom bar brawl out here with the Liar's Handshake and shotguns with 1-2 punch. I mean, really though, killing a raid boss in 3 seconds with primarily melee damage should pretty much never be a thing, despite being hilarious. Oh well, it'll still probably be a very good perk, but I understand their desire to water it down extremely in combination with other exotics. And that's all she wrote for the weapon changes in this week's TWAB. Definitely a lot of things to think about. Again, Bungie is giving us a ton of PvE weapon buffs to counter the negative effects of taking away our auto reload mechanics that we've become so dependent on. If you have any thoughts on these changes, please let me know down in the comment section. Based on all this new info, what weapons do you think are going to become insane, either in PvP or PvE, when Shadowkeep drops? I gotta tell you, I really have my eyes on the Crimson. Kinda worried a little bit that it might be about to become a complete terror in PvP. It may not have a time to kill as good on paper as something like the spare rations, but who knows, the damage buff might make it way easier to use. I guess time will tell. Anyway, feel free to discuss with me down in the comment section, and don't forget to click subscribe to become part of my awesome community. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.